Hello everyone, in this video I am going to talk to you about the fundamentals of photography and how to get a good exposure. Now, it doesn't matter if you use an SLR or a digital SLR, the principle is the same, and the way that these cameras work is basically the same. Well, before explaining all of them, let's make an analogy. Well, the camera is a reproduction, a mechanical reproduction of our eye. So we would have the lens, that is our cornea. We would have the aperture, which is our iris, and we also have the format on which we are recording, which is the retina. Now, this is a mechanical version, and it is reproducing exactly how the eyes work. This is interesting, but the fact is that on this we would have more control than over our eye. Our eye will make the correct exposure based on its programming. Basically, our brain works like a program. Now, why I'm doing this analogy? Well, when using this, we are trying to reproduce exactly what we are seeing. So this is why we would need to understand how we can control this. Now, aperture. Aperture is as the part of the lens that in our eye is the iris. It's the opening through which the light is traveling. The aperture does two things. One is let a quantity of light going through it, and then controls the depth of field. Now, as we have the aperture opened, and more light is traveling through the lens. When the aperture is wide open, the depth of field is shallower, so we have a small depth of field. Now, as we increase the size of the aperture and we go at higher f-stops, there is less light traveling through the lens. However, we would have a wider depth of field. This would help us to have sharp images when we are taking landscape photography, and in different situations when we actually need to have more in clear, or we have more elements that are sharp. Now, this is the aperture. After the aperture, we have the shutter. Now, in SLR, we have a mirror that will reflect the image that is seen through the lens, and it is reflected on the viewfinder, so we would see exactly through the lens. Now, what is happening here? The mechanics of it. The mirror, when we expose, the mirror will go up and will let the shutter open. I'm going to open the camera, and this is the shutter. Shutter is made out of two curtains, as you can see here, that work together but a little bit independent. When we expose, let me put it on bulb. When we expose, the first curtain will open and let light go through, and when the exposure is ended, the other curtain will cover the sensor, like this. So now the first curtain goes away and let the light travel to the sensor, and when the exposure is ended, the other one covers it, and the shutter comes back to its original position. This happens automatically in an SLR, digital SLR. Now, what shutter speed does? Shutter speed exposes for a certain amount of time the sensor or the film, and this also influences the movement in the image. Now, for example, if we have something that is moving in our frame, and we have long shutter speed, that object that is moving or that person that is moving will be blurred, and the sensor will record all its movement. As we increase the shutter speed, that movement is frozen. So that's really useful when we we want to shoot um, birds that are flying, people that are running, sports, and everything that is at high speed. If we want to record the moving, to see, for example, do a panning where we want to give the impression that things are moving, we would use longer shutter speed. Now, the last element, let's imagine that this is the sensor that comes after the the shutter. Let's imagine that this is your sensor in the SLR, digital SLR. Now, this one is sensible to all the light that is coming in. Now, at ISO 100, it will record a certain amount of light. When we would double that, we will increase the amount of light recorded with one stop. So what this does, when the ISO is increased, it will record more light. Right? Now, this is really useful when we cannot have the exposure that we want based on the shutter and and um, and the aperture values that we desire. So it's really useful to increase your ISO. However, when we increase the ISO, we are losing quality of the image. So this is the big disadvantage when using higher ISOs. When we control the three elements that are basically controlling our exposure, then we would get the images that we want and that we see with our own eyes. Now, we have manual modes, we have semi-automatic modes, and we can use those to learn how to control our ISOs, our shutter speed, and our aperture. In the next video, I am going to show you how we can play with that. So till next time, I hope this was helpful for you, and see you around.